Another letter from Mary in Pennsylvania tells the president of her uncle, Corporal Andrew Boyer, who has been missing in action in Korea since September of 1951. Mary has a picture of her uncle hanging in her living room as a reminder of his commitment and service to our country. Both of these men and their families represent thousands of proud, patriotic American families.
Yes.
The president is committed to them and will work to bring them the closure they deserve.
Hallelujah.
On another matter, we have seen all of the alarming images of the wildfires causing severe damage out west. The White House and FEMA have been actively monitoring the wildfires to ensure that federal assistance is provided as quickly as possible.
Good.
On Saturday, the president declared that an emergency exists for the California wildfires.
Right.
As a result, FEMA has placed resources from 8 different federal departments and agencies to support the efforts of local firefighters and relief organizations.
Good.
The president will continue to monitor this ongoing emergency and make sure the people of California receive the assistance they need to keep them safe and recover. Our prayers are with the firefighters who recently lost their lives battling these fires and their grieving families.
Yes.
Lastly, the president has been closely following the ongoing situation in Turkey involving Pastor Andrew Brunson. We've seen no evidence that Pastor Brunson has done anything wrong,
right,
and we believe he is a victim of unfair and unjust detention by the government of Turkey.
Right.
At the president's direction, the Department of Treasury is sanctioning Turkey's Minister of Justice and Minister of Interior,
right,
both of whom played leading roles in the arrest and detention of Pastor Brunson.
Right.
As a result, any property or interest in property of both ministers within U.S. jurisdiction is blocked, and U.S. persons are generally prohibited from engaging in transactions with them. For anything further, I would refer you to the Treasury Department on that front, and with that, I will take your questions. Zeke.
Thank you, sir. First, just a quick note on behalf of the press corps. Last month, there were only 3 briefings with you, totaling under an hour. If at some point in the next month or two, obviously there's travel concerns, but if you can, we'd appreciate it if you'd be able to give some more time. There are a lot of issues we'd like to cover. One of those, first off, was the president's tweet this morning about the Russian president's direction to the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, asking him to end the Mueller probe right now. The president said a few weeks ago that a few months ago, that he was not going to intervene. The Department of Justice is handling that investigation. Does that tweet this morning mark a change in posture by the president?
It's not an order. It's the president's opinion, and it's ridiculous that all of the corruption and dishonesty that's gone on with the launching of the witch hunt, the president has watched this process play out, but he also wants to see it come to an end, as he stated many times, and we look forward to that happening.
And on different topics here, you mentioned that the transfer of these remains from North Korea, that are fulfilling his commitment to the president as treated in Singapore. There's a report yesterday that North Korea is still assembling ICBMs, and as well as Pentagon says that it's not yet possible to verify that the remains that are being transferred back are in fact human or American. How does that meet sort of the test of North Korea fulfilling its commitment to the agreement in Singapore?
I'm not going to comment on the first part of your question on any potential intelligence matter. In terms of the remains, we have the best of the best that have been working over the last several weeks on this process. We'll keep you updated on it,
right.
But we feel comfortable in the assessment that they've made up until this point. John?
Sarah, on the next proposed tranche of tariffs against China, the figure initially for tariffs was 10%, but it's our understanding that the president now wants to take that up to 25%. What's the reason behind increasing it from 10 to 25?
Fairness.
And in a tit for tat, if you want to call it trade war or something else, who has more bullets, China or the United States?
The president firmly believes that the United States certainly does. We'll have an update later today, and there will be a call at 3:30 this afternoon to walk through the details of that update in regards to the question you asked about 10 to 25. Look, the bottom line is the president's going to continue to hold China responsible for their unfair trade practices.
Hallelujah.
This has gone on for long enough, and he's going to do something about it.
Hallelujah.
Does the president believe that?
Sorry, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, the president has made some headway with the EU in terms of lowering trade barriers, taking steps toward leveling the playing field. Does the president and his team believe that that is possible with China without taking some real punitive measures?
Certainly, we'd like to see the playing field level. The president, as both he and I think about 15 members of his administration have said repeatedly, we'd like to see the unfair trade practices stop. But until that happens, the president's going to hold their feet to the fire. He's going to continue to put pressure on China, and he's not going to sit back and allow American industries and American workers to be taken advantage of.
Hallelujah.
Sarah, churches around the country, synagogues, some evangelical leaders have been up in arms in the last few weeks about last year's tax cut law. They say there's a provision in there that's going to force them to pay a new 21% federal income tax on the benefits that they give to certain employees. Can you assure churches from the podium there that they're not going to have to pay a new tax?
I'm not going to make a blanket generalization about every church in America, but certainly the goal of the tax cuts and reforms package was to provide the greatest amount of relief to the greatest number of Americans, and we feel that it's done that. We feel that
Right.
the other policies that the president has put forward when it comes to the economy have certainly moved the ball forward, made our
Right.
economy infinitely stronger than it has been in decades. And I
Right.
think you can see that by all of the numbers that have come out over the last year and a half. Hunter?
Thank you, Sarah. These are traditionally tax exempt groups. What is the president prepared to do to make sure they keep their tax exempt status?
Certainly something that we're looking into, but I don't have anything specific for you on that front. Hunter?
Thank you, Sarah. Federal law says that, quote, any threatening letter or communication.
I want to stop right there to make a statement, because various people did not agree with the Windmill Ministries missions. All the money that has come out of the pocket of the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, not one dime got tax exemption, and not one dime come from volunteers giving to a non-profitable organization such as the Windmill Ministries missions here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. I just wanted to make that clear before I go any further.
Tesla plans to spend $5 billion to build a plant in China. They're saying it's not going to affect Tesla operations in the U.S., but I'm wondering whether the administration has any concerns about Tesla's plans.
Certainly, we'd love to see all American companies investing here. I don't have anything specific on Tesla, but we would encourage all companies to build their plants in America, put their investments here, and certainly not engage and help bolster a country like China that has continued to be part of a very unfair process and very unfair trading practices.
Right.
John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. There was a reaction to the president's tweets today from some of his allies on Capitol Hill. Republican Senator Hatch said, "I don't fully get what he's trying to do." And another Republican Senator, Senator Thune, said the Mueller investigation needs to move forward. He said they ought to let them complete their work. Do you agree with that sentiment expressed by Senator Thune, that this investigation by Mr. Mueller ought to be completed and not be sort of cut off at its
We
knees?
certainly think it should be completed. We'd like it to be completed sooner rather than later. It's gone on for an extensive amount of time. They've
Right.
still come up with nothing in regards to the president.
Right.
We'd like to see it come to a close.
Right.
We've said that a number of times. So sure, we actually agree on that front. Cecilia?
If I may.
Sorry, I'm just because we're tight on time because the president's going to be speaking. Cecilia, go ahead. Sorry, John, just because we're tight on time, I'll try to get to as many
President's gonna
people
be
as possible.
speaking.
Cecilia, go ahead.
What's he going to be speaking about?
Millions of people are voting illegally in this country. Is that the basis for this push for requiring voter IDs?
Even if there are 10 people that are voting illegally, it shouldn't happen. The president wants to see the integrity of our election systems upheld.
Right.
And that's the purpose of his comments. He wants
Right.
to make sure that anybody that's voting is somebody that should be voting.
Right.
And I think that's something that frankly should be celebrated.
Don't want a dead
not
person
discriminated.
voting.
When
Major.
The president went to a grocery store.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure why that matters either. Major.
Right.
Last night.
Stupid question.
Grocery store. You go to the grocery store, I go to the grocery store. I've never had to show an ID
Been a
to
lot
buy
lately,
my
actually.
grocery store. I've never had to show an ID when I go to buy groceries.
Certainly, if you go to a grocery store and you buy beer and wine, you're certainly going to show your ID. I
Right.
don't think that.
Who doesn't drink meth?
He's not saying every time he went in. He said when you go to the grocery store. I'm pretty sure that everybody in here who's been to a grocery store that's purchased beer or wine has probably had to show their ID.
Or
If they didn't,
cigarettes.
Then that's probably a problem with the grocery store. Major, go ahead.
Sarah, to follow up on John Decker's
Tobacco.
question, you want the investigation to end. You want it to end, I presume, also without any obstruction, meaning without any interference. Many have described the president's tweet this morning as blowing off steam. Is that a fair characterization? It's just an opinion he's throwing out there. It has nothing to do with his actual governmental control of or supervision of this investigation.
Once again, as I said earlier, the president is stating his opinion.
Boy, oh
It's not
boy.
in order, but he's been, I think, crystal clear about how he feels about this investigation from
Right.
the beginning. Sarah.
Because you have said a moment ago that the investigation itself is corrupt. The Mueller investigation. Then you mentioned Comey and McCabe and Strzok. They're not Strzok certainly isn't anymore. He was for a
The
time.
entire investigation is based off of a dirty, discredited dossier that
Amen,
was
sister.
paid for by an opposing campaign and had a lot of corruption within the entity which was overseeing it, which was Peter Strzok, James Comey,
Right.
Andrew McCabe.
Right.
We've laid this out a number of times. I don't think that we have to go into
A
it.
dirty dossier.
If it is corrupt, why doesn't the president just end it or use the powers he has
Once
to
again,
end
the
it?
president's allowed this.
Why doesn't he follow through on it?
Once again, the president has allowed this process to play out, but he thinks it's time for it to come to an end. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just wondering if you can clarify with this tweet from this morning. Is it the president's desire for first Sessions to unrecuse himself from the probe, and is it also his desire for the special counsel to be fired?
I think I've clarified this about 10 times now. It's
Right.
the president's opinion. I don't have anything further. Steve?
Yes, Sarah. Last
Boy,
night
they
at
badger
the
her to
Capitol,
death.
The president again
She does such a
pushed for
good
creation
job.
of a Space Force as a new military branch. The Defense Department today missed the deadline to submit a report to Congress about how this Space Force is to be structured. And we're told that the White House has now twice rejected drafts because the Defense Department doesn't want a Space Force. It'd rather create a Space Command under the existing military structure. In view of this, how is the president going to force the creation of a Space Force?
We're continuing to work with the Department of Defense to figure out and determine the best way forward, something
Right.
the president feels strongly about.
Right.
And we're going to work with our team there and figure out the best solution.
Right.
You mean,
I have a question about the president is meeting with inner city pastors. Today, Secretary Carson has pushed policies that would raise the rent on many poor people. He's also pushed policies that would slow anti-immigration initiatives. What is the president going to say to these inner city pastors whose areas might
He
be
hadn't said
certainly that's the
anti-immigration.
reason to sit down with these individuals to hear their feedback, hear their concerns. I know the primary point of discussion
Boy.
for today is to discuss prison reform, but I wouldn't be surprised if they raise those issues, and that's why the president's invited them here so that he can have those ongoing conversations and determine how best to help them in a number of different situations.
Right.
in inner cities?
I'm sorry?
Are those policies that are raising rents on poor people and that are slowing anti-segregation initiatives, are they helping inner cities in the president's opinion?
I would have to look at the specific policies you're referencing. I'd be happy to do that after the briefing. Julie?
Sarah, members of this administration are apparently talking about big cuts to the refugee resettlement program, which is currently capped at 45,000, but I'm told it's under discussion for cuts as low as 25,000 next year. Does the president feel that this country admits too many refugees? What does he think the proper level is, and what would the rationale be for scaling it back?
This is part of an ongoing discussion, and no policy decisions have been made, but we'll keep you posted as they are. Jeff?
The program is too big.
I'm sorry?
Does the president think there are too many refugees coming into this country?
The president wants to make sure that whoever comes into the country, we know who they are, why they're coming, and that
has
they
good
pose no
intentions.
danger or threat to Americans. That's
Right.
the number one priority. We want to make sure that we have the processes in place and the ability to vet any individual that would come into this country. If the Department of Homeland Homeland Security and other agencies that they would work in coordination with, determine that they don't have the ability to vet a certain number, then certainly the president would have concerns with that. Again, the number one priority is national security and
Right.
making sure we have the ability to properly vet and process any individual that comes into this country. Jeff?
Sir, you said the president wants this investigation to be completed, but he is not.
I want to stop right there. Also pertaining to Space Force, it's all in regard to national interest pertaining to inventing this new entity, the same thing as the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. These are all entities that are created to protect us. And for surely as much hacking and smacking that has gone on in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years pertaining to being breached and leaks and all this other stuff, for surely people can acknowledge that this needs to be top priority pertaining to protecting our national interest. That's one of the reasons why that we're having all our ideals and everything stolen from us, is because it's a wide open interstate up there. And China or anybody else, once they hear of some sort of an ideal or see something that's appealing to them, they can steal that information, take it back to their country, and start manufacturing it. That's what Donald Trump is trying to prevent from happening. That way it can be a fair playing field across the board. We're not just talking about fair free trade, but we're talking about fair trade. He's already expressed that 1,000 million, zillion, trillion, quadrillion times.
Restructuring the way capital gains are taxed and on the possibility of a shutdown. Is the president talking about potentially endorsing a government shutdown before November's elections, after November's elections, or both?
On the first part of your question, this is something that has a lot of support from various people. No administration policy has been determined, but the president's asked the Treasury Department to take a look into it. On the second part of your question in regards to the shutdown, the president isn't focused on the timing of before or after the election. He's focused on the results. He's been talking about this for a year and a half. Our immigration system is completely broken, and he's begging and has been for Congress, particularly Democrats in Congress, to step up, do their jobs, stop kicking the ball down the field, and actually work with him to fix our system. It's that simple.
Does the president, though, have a personal opinion as to whether or not the current system works or this should be changed?
Again, confirmed by forecast.
I want to say this, and the ending of this. Congress passed a law mandating in the early 1900s that the Sharia law in the United States was against the law. But yet now we have over 2,000 mosques that preach and teach and represent the very influences that has come from the ideology of the Sharia law pertaining to these Muslim mosques that are all over America, over 2,000. And in some incidences, and I'm not trying to pick on no particular religion, I'm just telling you about the law, but in some incidences, they're so strong and predominant, they've actually changed the wording of the street signs to their preference. So, whenever it comes to immigration policies, it's pretty obvious that somebody has failed in regarding to the sanctuary cities that actually shelter illegal immigrants, to the point that now we don't know who is over here and what they represent, or who they represent, or what type of history that they may have had in whatever country that they come from, regardless whether they come from the ideology of Muslims, or the ideology of Hindus, or the ideology of some other form of religion that by and large the Christian society calls occults. But whenever it comes to our immigration policies, it's pretty obvious that they have been failing for years and years and years. That all our chief and commander is doing is trying to prevent another either quote quote massacre from occurring that could possibly originate from some of these unstable people or unstable groups. And he's also trying to prevent another 9/11 from occurring. And why the American people never woke up shortly after 9/11 towards going in and dissecting these different policies that we have here in America in protecting our interests, why they didn't jump on this is still beyond me. I'm still flabbergasted of how come the issues that Donald Trump is dealing with today was not dealt with the day after 9/11. I know this, whenever Pearl Harbor was attacked, we immediately shut down all our borders and started putting people in concentration camps that we didn't know for sure if we could trust or not. Now, whether or not those people remained in concentration camps, I don't know. I'm sure you can probably look it up and find out if they stayed in there or not. But whenever it comes to protecting the well-being of the American people, our chief and commander is on top of every iota that you can think of. And I just want to say, coming from the Windmill Ministries missions here at 291 Thompson Road, good job, Mr. President. 2 thumbs up. Keep the good work up. Keep your hand upon the helm and keep doing what you're doing, because it's obvious that nobody else was going to be willing to do it of the 2 or 3 or even 4 administrations before you. Thank God we have somebody in there that's going at this with both eyes open and with his antennas up towards looking at all the pros and cons. Thank you for listening to my viewers out there. Thank you for your prayers, and I appreciate the general public and their cooperation in being lenient, in not being judgmental of what this ministry actually was a part of and continues to be a part of even to this day, which is the teachings and the hidden parables that Jesus Christ of Nazareth taught to not only his people over there, but taught to all people everywhere, pertaining to love, grace, forgiveness, and yes, walking the straight and narrow in regard to love thy neighbor even as thyself. We have reached a very, very pinnacle point here in America, and I blame this off of sorcery. So many people have been brainwashed to the point that the true born-again Christians have been lax in allowing for this to grow and to manifest, to the point that now we got all these hate mongers out here that, pretty obvious, just like vandalizing this property and tearing down a sign that represents all veterans and people that's against peace. We have a society that thrives off of anarchy. We have a society right now that are growing up that are basically mindless. They do not have no conscience. They do not care how other people perceive them. They are heartless. They're cold. And as far as I'm concerned, they need to be categorized as being some of the most wickedest people on the earth, pertaining to them being like reptilians. A matter of fact, I think the spirit that dwells in some of these people are in fact the same type of spirit that dwells in a cold-blooded creature such as a snake or a lizard or something that don't care nothing about nothing but only itself. We live in a society right now that are mindless. They do not have a conscience pertaining to other people's feelings, other people's rights. We live in a society right now that are full of hate mongers and warmongers. And if there's ever been a time that the true Christian society needed to pray for a great revival, for a great movement, I believe it's in 2018. Beginning August the 1st. Good luck to all of us. Shalom. Shalom to those who are seeking a better way of prosperity and fairness for all of society, regardless of what side of the equator that you may be on. Thanks for listening. Shalom. As I travel through this pilgrim land, there is a friend who walks with me. As I kneel in prayer, I hope to meet you there. Precious Jesus, hold my hand. As I kneel in prayer, I hope to meet you there. Precious Jesus, hold my hand.